Thanks for having me. My name is Zhenlei, and today I will talk about life's too short to develop only for Android. I joined to server-driven UI. First, I will show you the agenda. So the first is the problem that I will introduce you, things that happened to me last month, a couple months ago. And then I will explain what is server-driven UI and how this can help me to solve this problem. Last but not least, our journey to server-driven UI. So you can learn from us things that's good and also for our mistakes. So as I said, a few months ago, I was developing a new feature. And the feature is the month of N. N stands for November. But first, the name was not that. The name was Black Friday. So that means Black Friday you deliver in the end of November. And now they decide to be the month of November. So I need to ship in the beginning of November. So that means instead of to release in 1 month, we need to release in 2 days this feature. So I will explain how is the feature and how we can manage to do this. So the marketing just approached us, say, can you deliver this feature in 2 days? And we said, yes, because of the things that we have. That's the server-driven UI. So the feature consists on this carousel here that you can see there, that basically will show some benefits, some perks for the user every week. Before in the Black Friday, they want to do every day. But they decide to go through the month because it's better to send to the user every week. And then this screen, when you click on one of the carousel, we open this new screen that we need to implement. If you see, it's not hard to implement these two features in 2 days, but you need to think about how to define the contract. You need to discuss with the backend. You need to set up many meetings. You need to do tests, end-to-end tests. It's impossible to do in 2 days. And this screen, they can redirect to many other screens, like the story screen and also the perk detail screen. And if you see, those screens are pretty similar. So the month of N, explore perks, detail is always the same code. So we are building similar screens over and over again. So if you have an issue in one screen, most likely you have in other screens. So you need to find the other screens that you implemented to try to fix. And maybe you forget one to fix. And beside that, you need to build those screens as well in other platforms, Android, iOS, and web. So we are building across many platforms. So the problem is multiplied by 3, in fact. So there must be a better way to do this. Server-driven UI to rescue. And this is the main reason that we managed to ship in 2 days. First, I want to explain what is not server-driven UI. So you can see this kind of response, that you have the insurance, account detail, and card offer. As you can see, it's a JSON object. And we map this to the component, like you have the premium insurance, and you map to this JSON object where the insurance is the key. You have for the account detail, you have also for card offer. So if we want to add, for instance, the highlight that's in the bottom, you need to create a new JSON object in the backend to send, for sure. But we need to change also this in the front end and create a release to parse those information and show the UI component, right? And what we are doing here, basically, is the backend for front end, is the BFF. So now, what is the server-driven UI? It's something similar, but there is a slight difference that I want to explain. So, for instance, here is what is a server-driven UI. As you can see, we have a list of items. And how we identify the component? The component is not the context like it's the insurance. It's the UI component. And for instance, for the first one, we have the header. We have the small body text. We won't say, oh, this is an insurance. No, it's just a header. It's small body text, button, simple card, and carousel. So what we have here is a polymorphic JSON that based on the type, you can parse to a UI component in the front end. So I will give you now an overview, how is the server-driven UI. So this is the API response, this polymorphic JSON, and this polymorphic JSON, we need to map this to a DTO, to a response objects. That is this one, header, DTO, small body text DTO, you can call response, data model, any name that you feel better. In my case, I just write DTO just to fit in the slides. Then we have this UI component, this render UI component that take those DTOs and map to a UI component that are those one. So what does this mean? Imagine that I have this screen, and we saw that people are not clicking too much on insurance. So we want to make it more visible for the users. So we want to move the insurance section a little bit up. So how we can do this with the JSON polymorphic? We just need to change the order of the items, the list of items. And when we do this, they just move up. Cool, but still not, the user didn't click too much. It would be really nice if you show like in a grid, show all the components, because the components in the carousel is a little bit hidden. So if the backend send, instead of the type carousel and send grid, and we know how to render a grid component, done, we just map the grid DTO to the screen, and we don't need to do any release. Because as you know, release is a little bit painful, you need to catch up the release cycle, and sometimes if you have a big app, the build time takes longer. So some benefits after build the system, the server-driven UI. You improve the communication, because all the components that you have, you don't need to discuss. You just need to build the screen. We need this component, this component, this component. We just need to add in the list. So the communication is way easier because we don't need to define contract. We just define the contract if we build new components. We can reuse existing UI components. As you saw before, we reuse the grid component. We had the carousel and we want to change to grid. It was easy to reuse the other component. We minimize the repetition. Why? Because we don't need to fix all over the place. We just have a one-handed UI component. If there is a bug, it's there. It will just fix in one place. And you don't miss to fix it all over the places in your code. You can react fast to changes. Like the market come to us, can you manage to fix this in 2 days? We could say, it's not possible. Let's leave it for the next Black Friday next year. It's okay for you? They will say, yeah, it's okay, but it would be nice if you manage to do this year. Last year in this case. And we managed to do because the change that we have done was mainly backend. In the front end, we don't need to do anything, so we can react fast to changes. We can launch without publishing a Play Store. We just need to do changes in the backend. And as you know, backend, you just need to deploy. They are super happy. In your case, we need to go to Google Play Store, publish the app. If you have some automation, it will help. Otherwise, you need to do manually. But we do automatically, but still take time. We need to do some regression, test manually, and sometime automatically, and so it's really nice. So now, let's explain our journey. And you will learn from us what we have done correctly, but for sure we did so many things that is not good. So it's good for you to learn things that you shouldn't do. Okay, so our journey, I will divide in 3 phases. The first phase is the foundation. I will explain how we'll build the server-driven UI and explain things that was good and not so good. Second, we create something called vaccine. What is this vaccine? It's a solution that we come up to solve a problem related to cross-function domain, when you have some feature that we need to implement in another domain. So when you're working in a huge team like 30 developers. And last but not least, Androidless. How will involve the server-driven UI in a way they don't need me anymore as an Android developer? Only when I need to create new components. Okay, so let's go to foundation. So before to start the foundation, I wanted to explain that it's really important when you have a server-driven UI to have in place a design system. And I will go pretty fast about design system because it's not the main topic of this presentation. But design system, there is a nice quote that says, we are not designing pages, we are designing system of components. So this design system was created to solve design at scale. So to create a set of standards that reusable components and patterns to solve the standard of the design in the whole project that is big. And one illustration that is really good to see is this one that represents pretty well what is design system. You have the identity, what is the colors, fonts, images, sounds. So you define all those things related to identity. You have the principle, what is the brand values, the purpose, and so on. And also the best practice, what is UX? You give training to people. So it's not just define the components. There is a lot of things around the system design. And if you see in the middle, there is this component and pattern. And as you can see, it's not only design, it's also dev. So you don't just create the component, you need to implement also components in all the platforms as well. So the design system is more than just the design. So you have the functional documentation that explain how to use those components and how you need to follow. And you have also the technical documentation, how to use the code created by the devs. And the design system that we are using in the company is the atomic design. I don't know if you ever heard about this, but it was created having in mind about the chemistry. So they try to follow the chemistry. In which way? The atom is the small particle in the universe. So they think that atom is the smallest piece of UI, the components that you have. And you can combine those components together to create a molecule. And those molecules combined, they create the organism. And then they break the chemistry analogy, create templates and pages just to have something more meaningful for the end users or for business people. Because you cannot say, we have this organism. No, we have this template that's a combination of organisms. That's the page later. So a better explanation I will show now. So for instance, we have this atomic design, we have those atoms. Which atom? We have this spot icon. And then we have this body text. And the small body text. And when we combine them together, we have this molecule. That's the 3-item container. And when we combine them together, we can have this organism that product spotlight. We did not go to templates and the page, but we stop in the organism because most of the people that is more tech, so we understand that we don't need templates and pages. And atomic design, as you see, is not only design, but also code. So now I will show the code how it is. So for this 3-item container, we have a representation in code that is this view entity. You can think about like a view model, not view model from Android, but a view entity. And it's like a data class that represents this 3-item container that contains the title, the subtitle, and the spot icon view entity. And this view entity, you can think about the object that you want to set in the compose, because then we have like this custom view that you need to implement like an interface, this interface here, that's the bindable. And as you can see in the bindable, there is this 3-item container view entity that we need to implement the method bind, and you can just set this 3-item container view entity in this custom view, and then you know how to render in the screen. So you don't need to think about how to handle this in the screen. You need to have all those code in place to take the advantage later in the server-driven UI. Cool. Now the foundation. We define a meeting in the beginning to do a kickoff of the project. So we define some requirement for server-driven UI that sometimes is good, sometimes was not good. So the first thing that was good was the stateless backend. We want our backend to be stateless. So they won't keep any state, so it will be really simple. They will be just aggregator. They will just consume all the microservices, get the information, and show a response as a server-driven UI for the client. The second decision was not good, that you can see from the emoji, that I'm super sad about this, is the backend without versioning. Because in the beginning, they don't want to increase the complexity, because versioning is really tricky. And they said, in the beginning, we don't need it versioning. But in the future, we will need it, so we can add it later if we need it. And we need it later. And versioning causes a lot of issues, because if you think, what happens if the client cannot understand the component, what we should do? Usually we need to have a backward compatibility, or maybe just drop the component. And if you send a component that has a deep link and the front end cannot understand. So versioning is really important, but in the beginning we didn't have the versioning. Static screen. So for my team, it worked pretty well. I'm from membership, and most of my screen are static, just show content. So it's really nice to use server-driven UI because you just get the response and show in the screen. We don't need to keep any state in the front end, because if you keep a state in the front end, that means you have some logic in the front end that you need to handle. Last but not least, all the clickable components will have a deep link to navigate somewhere. And we also have tracking. So we can perform later A/B tests and see the performance of the app as well. So now I will explain the mappings that we have. So we have three mappings. The first mapping is the polymorphic JSON to data model. Then data model to view entity, and view entity to view. So let's start from polymorphic JSON to data model. How can we do this? So we have three libraries to decide which one we can use. We have the JSON, we have the Moshi, and the clock serialization. And unfortunately, I would like to use code serialization, but I couldn't because what happens with code serialization is really tricky to do something that we want to do it. Because if we cannot understand the one component, we just want to ignore this JSON object. And with code serialization, we will just get a JSON parse error. And we don't want to do this because we want to be resilient in the client as the backend doesn't have versioning. So if we cannot understand a component, we just drop this component. And with code serialization, it's really tricky. So because the first decision that we decided not to have versioning generate a lot of code in the front end that was not needed. So in this case, we decided to pick Moshi because Moshi, they read the JSON as a stream, so we can ignore the component that we don't need it. So it was easy. We could use maybe JSON. I'm not so expert in JSON, but I know the backend use a lot. But it's not common in Android, so I don't want to add this library in the project. So now I will explain how is the Moshi setup. So first, we want to be resilient. So we create an N JSON adapter with the default fallback. What does this mean? If the backend sends an N that we cannot understand, we just fall back to a default one that we understand. So if the backend create a new N, it's okay. The old users, you see the default one, and the new one, you see the new one that they are sending because you can change the code. And we create like a custom JSON adapt factory to handle this polymorphic JSON and ignore the invalid JSON. Main reason to do this is to be resilient because we didn't have versioning in the beginning. I will explain how does this work. For instance, we have this polymorphic JSON, this simple card with icon, title, subtitle, and we map this to a simple card DTO using the Moshi. In case the backend doesn't send the icon, that is a mandatory field, we just explode in the front end. And we don't want to have this JSON parse error, so we don't want to show an error screen to the user. We just want to ignore this component, but still showing the other components. And how we can do this? We just convert this simple object card DTO to this unknown DTO. So when the JSON parse object fails for this object, we just convert to this unknown DTO. As you can see, there is this trouble inside that we can use to track later to try to understand what is the Android version, what is the component that's not handling properly in the front end. We also created this operation to wrap the deep link tracking, so we just need to map this URI deep link and the tracking to an object. That is the operation that contains the URI and the tracking. So we can perform track every time that perform a navigation. So now, how is the Moshi setup? We need to find somehow to map the type of the component to the DTO. And the way that I'm doing is I just create this enum. That's the header, body text, and then all the items. And then we just need to define inside what is the class that I need to map to the DTO. Then I just need to set up the Moshi to get this information. Header, you map to header DTO. Super simple, this part. Now let's move to the next part, that's moving how to map data model to view entity. And this is a little bit tricky because there are many ways to do it. There is the common approach to just create like a mapper. And the biggest problem that I see creating a mapper for this is you need to inject the mapper for each DTO because you need to somehow say for this DTO, you need to map to this view entity. So you have like a mapper that injects the other mapper, or maybe you just have one mapper with a huge when. When is this view entity, map to this view entity. If it's this DTO, map to this view entity. So it's really tricky. So what we did is we just take advantage of the polymorphism. So we created this interface. That's just an item that forced us to every DTO that we have, we need to know how to convert to this to a view entity, and it makes sense. But there are some people that will say, you are changing your DTO, your response. They should be like a Java bean without any logic inside. Yeah, but if they need to know how to map to a view entity, it makes sense to have this interface. Otherwise, you have like a way that you just check the type. If it's this DTO, map to this view entity. If it's this one, so you'll be a huge God class. So I want to avoid this, so I created this interface. And here's the example. We have this button DTO. We need to implement this interface. Cool, item, button view entity. So I need to implement the map to view entity that I pass the action delegate that contains the information how to perform the navigation and so on. And as you can see, the button view entity is nullable. Why is nullable, this thing that I'm returning? And the main reason is this part here. Because I get the operation that contains the deep link, and I need to map to this action entity to perform the navigation. But who knows if the client knows how to navigate, because maybe we have an old version and the backend send a deep link that's kind of new, because we don't have versioning. So we need to drop this component. And the way that I'm dropping this component is making this map to be null, so I ignore this null object. So if you have version in the beginning, you won't face this issue. And then is the normal mapping to view entity. So now if you receive a list of DTO, you just need to do dot map it dot to view entity. Easy. We don't need to like a when is this type, this DTO map to this view entity. So now we need to map the view entity to view. I divide this in 3 steps. You need to create like a ViewFactory, and this ViewFactory you know how to inflate the view. And then, as you know how to inflate the view, you need to have like a ViewFactory map. You need to know how to map the view entity to this custom view. And then we just need to set this ViewFactory map in the RecyclerViewAdapter. I know that is a lot of code, and it's the last talk, but let's keep with the talk. So let's see the code now, view entity to ViewFactory. What we usually would need to do is, we need to create this ViewFactory. And the way that we usually do is, we add inside the view. Why we add inside the view? Because in this case, we know that they know how to inflate themselves. So I have this class here, ViewFactory. And this ViewFactory just know how to inflate. Why we want to have this? Because we want to set this later in the recycle view. So we are using the adapt delegate pattern. And as you can see, the ViewFactory, they know what is the view entity. And by that, we can create an easy map from view entity and what is the ViewFactory that inflates the view. So here I will show you how to do this. So we need now to create the ViewFactory map, and just to avoid like the when, the huge when, but in this case we have a map. That for me, I think is better. So you need to create like this ViewFactory map. As you can see, we create like a mutable map, and we add in this map what is the view entity and what is the view controller. And with the view controller, we know how to inflate this view. So later we can pass this to the RecyclerViewAdapter and use the adapted delegate approach to inflate the views. And if you have complex styles, that means carousel, section, grids that contains inside more other views, we need to pass inside the view controller map as well, so they know how to render the items inside. But as everyone loves Kotlin, loves sugar syntax, we come up with this sugar syntax. We create a view controller map that extends for the linked hash map. And this linked hash map has a method called register. And this register basically just put in this link in the hash map. As you can see, we have the reference of entity class. But in order to get this reference, you need to add the inline and the refired. Inline just like move the put in the place, and refired say to the compiler, yeah, you can use this type of the class, because this is not possible in Java. By that, we have this amazing sugar syntax. We just need to say register and header view.viewController, because the view controller knows what is the view entity, so we don't need to pass as a key, because we can extract this key from this object. Cool. now we just need to set in the adapter. And to set in the adapter is basically you create the RecyclerViewAdapter, and then you need just create the factory map and create the object, add in the RecyclerViewAdapter. Then you just need to submit in the RecyclerViewAdapter, and they will just load in the RecyclerView. Cool. Now, and the test strategy for this. We have this kind of test strategy. We have the microservice and the polymorphic JSON. And we do the contract test there. Data model to view entity, we do a unit test. And this part, I didn't implement yet. I'm in the process. Is create a screenshot test. I'm planning to use paparazzi because we run in a JVM. Some tips to implement server-driven UI. The first one, versioning. If you have versioning, you don't need to do a lot of things that I've done. You just need to know how to render the component in the screen. So versioning is super important. So define in the beginning what is the policy of this versioning. You drop the component, you do backward compatibility, you just fall back to another component, and the backend you have some central place to have the deep links, for instance. So it's really important to have a versioning in the backend. It's nice also to have like a demo app, so you can show to the designers, to the product, how look like all the components that you have. Create a bootstrap. What is this bootstrap? As you can see, every time that you create a new component, I need to register in the inner. I need to create the mapping from DTO to view entity. I need to create also the inflate the view, create the custom view, and so on. So what I have is this bootstrap in Python that I receive a JSON as a parameter. They create all those things for me. Also the test, because the test, if you see, is like convert DTO to view entity. So it's always the same. So I just need to change the generator, because the generator say create the view entity, create the DTO, and I just need to create a code that map DTO to view entity. So they build all the tests automatically for me. Another thing that is really nice is to use some HTTP debugging proxy that intercept the request, and you can change the response. So what I usually do is, when I have the server-driven UI in place, I can come up with a new JSON and show to the product, oh, this is the new screen that you want to build, right? So I don't need to develop anything. I just change the response of one screen that I have with server-driven UI, decide which component I want to show, and I show to the designer, is this thing that you want, or for product, the PM, is this one that you want? Yes, okay. Now let's make the backend implement this response first. So you can see beforehand how the screen looks like. Another thing that's really cool, as we have tracking, is A/B test. Because as the backend control the position of the items, the component that will be shown, you can change the components, the order of the components, and make some A/B tests. Another thing that you can do, you can maybe customize for a specific user to show a different kind of response. So it's really powerful, server-driven UI in this case. Another thing that's really cool is about content management system. What is content management system? It's a system that you can manage the content. Okay, I just read in the backward, but it's just, you can change the image, you can add the text, things that we want to show. This is more common to use in the web, but we start to use also in mobile. So what does this mean? We have this screen that we can upload the image, that we can upload the text. Usually what we have is in the backend, we just upload things in the Amazon S3 or some place on the database or whatever. So we have this content management system that is controlled by the marketing team, because in membership, we work super close with marketing. So what happens is, this CMS is controlled by marketing, so they have the power to change the title, the image, the content of this page. Then we have a microservice that consume the CMS, and then we just need to convert it to a JSON, a server-driven UI that is showing the screen. And why this is so nice? Because now they don't need to contact us and say, hey, backend, can you change the image for us? No, they go to this content management system and they change the image the way that they want. Can you change there is a typo here? Okay, go there and you change the text. So it's like you have less work, not less work, because they have the control of this. They know what should be written. We don't know. We just take the test and put there. So it's nice to have, in this case, a CMS, so they have the full control. So that means the campaign that we saw in the beginning, that will show the perks to the user, we don't need to add in the database, we don't need to add in the Amazon S3. They control everything in the CMS. So every week, they were posting or publishing things in the content management system, we just fetch and show in the screen. So now I will talk about vaccine. What is vaccine? So imagine this situation, not so hypothetical situation. You have this screen that is owned by the space team. My team's membership is not space. So my team membership squad want to add this component in this screen, in space screen. Why? Because the user has this bunch of money. I would like to have this, but the user has this a lot of money, and it would be really, really nice to show this card that can promote them to be premium user, because this is a standard user. So we need to discuss, in this case, what we need to do. OPM need to discuss with the APM, say, hey, how long will it take for you guys to add this component in your screen? And the space PM, you just say, maybe this can take long, I don't know, I need to discuss it with my developers. So they go to talk to the developers. But the developer doesn't know so much about the business logic of this component, when to show. So what happened is, they went to talk with all devs to say, hey, what I need to do here? Where can I get this information of this title, subtitle, those images? And they get to know where I get this information. So they go back to the squad, and now the backend discuss with the front end to define the contract to change the response of this screen, right? And this will just take longer. And maybe also the space squad has other priority than build this screen, because they are not the team. So it'll be really nice. If this component is owned by us in membership. So if you have the full control of this component, we don't need to have this many alignment with the other team. And we come up with the vaccine. And what is vaccine? It's just a custom view. Server-driven UI, vaccine view. Simple custom view. What is special in this custom view? They have a presenter. Okay, why they have a presenter, not a view model? Because view model doesn't handle properly with custom view, so I create the normal presenter. And what is this presenter? They just have the logic to perform requests inside. So what does this mean? It's a self-contained view that knows how to perform requests and know how to load in the screen. And why this is so cool? Because they will perform the request, and if it succeed, we show. And if it's fail, okay, it's still the same in the screen, we don't show. And this component, they load the server-driven UI component, so they can load any kind of component that we want. And the thing that is super magic is this view entity. What is the parameter of this view entity? It's a path. What is this path? It's the web service relative path. We just need to pass the path to this microservice. And this microservice is in the membership. We know what is the business logic of this component. So they will just consume and they will load in the screen a server-driven UI component. So as you can see, we have a screen that's not server-driven UI, and we eject a server-driven UI component in the screen that's not. And this solves the problem of alignment. The only alignment that we need to do is just ask the APM. If you add this component, it will impact somehow your tracking or some performance in your screen. You say, no, you can't add it. Done. We just added this component. Do I need to do tests for this? Unit test? Don't need it, because this component is already tested. We just need to do some contract tests in the front end, in the back end. Now, last but not least, Androidless. What is Androidless? Imagine again, not so hypothetical situation. Build a new screen. This is so common. You need to build a new screen. And imagine that this new screen is a server-driven UI. And what do we need to do when you build a new screen, if you are in a multi-module? You need to create a new module. Set up the DI. Create the retrofit service. Set up the server-driven UI library, if you have the server-driven UI in place. Create the view model, if you are following the MVVM. Create activity fragment. This conflict, do I want activity fragment? So I just say create activity fragment. And last but not least, test. Right? So you just want to cry every time that you want to build a new feature. It's really painful. You have probably some bootstrap to help you to set up a new module, but sometimes you don't have, so you just want to cry. And in this case that we are following the server-driven UI, I start to think, what is the only thing that is different here? Is to create the retrofit service, because the web service is different, but the rest is the same because it's powered by server-driven UI. It can be any components. Why not create a deep link for this? And the deep link could be like this, server-driven UI and the path, and what is the web service that we want to consume. And you can pass downstream from the view mode to the data layer, set up in the retrofit, and they can perform the request. So here's an example. You have this month of N detail, you click, you have this deep link that navigates to this story with the ID 2. When you click in the item, they navigate to the next screen. They pass this web service downstream, perform the request, and load a server-driven UI screen that's dynamic. And you have another button that there is this deep link as well, membership perks, that when we click in the button, they navigate to the next screen, pass this web service that you downstream and perform the request and show in the screen. So what we have here? It's a browser. So we have the navigation, the flow with server-driven, the flow, and also we can have a dynamic screen. So that means they don't need me anymore as Android developer if he use the same components. So I can focus on other stuff that's more important, maybe animation, improve the build time. And another thing that I'm doing a lot as well, I'm moving toward also to backend, try to help them to implement versioning now. And at the same time, we Android developers. In my company, we use in the backend Spring MVC. And Spring MVC uses Kotlin. And who knows more Kotlin? Android developers or backend? Android developers. Why? Because we worked for like 6 years, 7 years. And backend started like 2 or 3 years ago. So we have more experience with Kotlin. But we don't know so much about the framework. But it's similar some stuff. So they have the Spring injection, similar to Dagger. So it's just different annotations. So it's easier also to switch also a little bit in the backend. So for this reason, life is too short to develop only for Android. Thank you very much. So later I will publish the slide on my Twitter. You just follow me in the Twitter and get the slides there. And if you have any questions, do you have time for questions? Yeah.
Hello. Hello. Thanks a lot for your presentation. Do you have a way to manage an offline mode?
No.
Okay. And do you plan to have that or?
In N26, that's a bank we want a real time, and so it's not. So we don't have offline mode. But if you think about offline mode, you just need to save this JSON. But one thing that we have in the backend is we use the cache. And when you use cache, you can, it's like offline.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, so all the strings are sent back to the JSON. How do you deal with localization?
So the backend is translate first. So we have like a microservice that has another tool that there is the proofreader, people from translation that add all the translation. So we have a microservice that every 15 minutes, 30 minutes, they fetch those strings, dump in a database or somewhere, and then all the microservices consume this microservice, passing the key, and they get the string. So we don't translate in this case in the front end because it's not good, because if you want to change the string, it's easy to change it in the back end. So it's basically you need to think, what is the way that I can work in a way that I don't need to do anything in the front end? And because the idea of server-driven UI is to have the logic in the back end. So if you can move out this, you'll be better. Because if you have the key in the Android, iOS should have as well. And it start to get crazy. And maybe web you have as well. So it's not good to have the keys in the front end.
Yes.
I already have the microphone.
Okay,
already.
sorry.
Thank you for the presentation. I have two questions. The first one is about fetching resources like images. For views using images, do you load a default resolution image, or do you send the device
So this is
and then get the good one?
So this is a nice question. We are not doing this, mainly because most of the users that use the app, they don't stay longer. So we don't need to really optimize for the images. So we just load one size, that's 2x, and we resize in the front end to many resolutions. So it will be lighter in this case. But if you have a case that you need to send different resolution, what you need to do is in the front end you send the header what is the specification of the device, and then in the back end you just provide the correct image. But even though we are handling two things, that is the dark mode and the light mode, so the back end sends us sometimes two images.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is about tracking and building the navigation of the user inside of the app, because it's always driven by the server, maybe the data team, how they can stay up to date with what the server is showing to the user.
Yeah, for now, we don't have like a structure for this. So what I'm doing is track everything. So if the BI want to do something in this screen, he knows, he has all those tracking. And we have also a way in the Android app that we can log all the tracks that we have. So it's easy to tell to the design, to the BI, those are the track of this screen. So if you want to do a BI, we have those things. If you want something more, we don't have it, and we need to add manually.
Okay, so in that case, I will just develop on this last question.
Yeah.
Because we are dealing with bank data, this means that the server will show to the data team UI anonymized without the data that have been sent in the JSON files.
Yeah, we are not logging sensitive data. We are just saying the user clicking in this component, and the idea of this component is some perk, for instance. But we cannot track sensitive data because it's a banking regulation. And if we have, we need to force everyone to update the app and remove all those things in the log.
Thank you.
Welcome. Oh, there is two.
Yeah, hi. So I have a question in terms of UX. So if user is using the app and they see the UI change following the backend update, so can that be a problem or not? Like they will see some strange behavior when we refresh the stream. So can that be a problem?
Yes. Can you? I didn't get so well the question.
So like they are using the problem that the backend gets updated.
Yeah.
So the API will change, the result will change, and then the UI will change also. So the user will see that change.
Yeah.
So can that be a problem?
Yeah. So in this case, you need to measure with A/B test or something. But usually, what happens is we have like a design, and they did the evaluation with BI or maybe user researcher that the screen is not performing pretty well. They just want to change to another component. You don't change completely the screen, otherwise the user will not. So, but we can change, for instance, a carousel for a grid. And the user, okay, now it's a grid, not a huge impact. But maybe they will click more because now they can see more stuff. This is one example that we don't have in the app, but it's an example that I want to give people.
So the idea is to see the change in real time, or like to see the change after the user?
It's not the real time, because every time that the user, because the N26 user, they usually open the app, check, and close the app. So when they open again, we check again. We don't have a socket for this because it's not worth. So every time that they open the screen, we just perform a request and get the information. So basically, it's super simple.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. First, I wanted to react to the orange guy asking for offline. You can do it natively with retrofit using cache control. I suggest you use it.
Yes.
We do it in the box well. My question for you was, you mentioned versioning. Can you talk about a bit more about that?
So the version that I was thinking to implement is something like a map. So what we need to do is versioning server-driven UI is not the endpoint versioning. We need to send it to the backend in the header, what is the app version, all the information that need, and then the backend just need to map somehow to the correct components, or if the DB link is not valid, they don't send. So I just need to think how I will structure this in the backend. If I will create like a map for this version, I support this component, this component, this component. So I don't know yet because I need to discuss with them to see what is the best approach and if they see some downsides because they have more experience in the backend than me. So I need to discuss with them. But this is the idea. We just need to send the app version and then you know from this app version, we just support this kind of depending on just those components and so on.
So the marketing team is building multiple versions of a screen?
No, the marketing doesn't build anything. They just follow what we say. So if you want to, we build the things in the CMS. So you just need to fill those information. If you fill those information, you're going to have this kind of screen with this content. So they don't have the flexibility yet. Maybe we will develop this thing to build the component on the fly, but we don't have this building component on the fly. We have like a structure. We have those components. So we have this page in the CMS that if you fill it, we will show this in the screen. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
There's other.
Hello, thank you very much for your presentation. I have a question regarding the last part of your presentation.
Yeah.
You basically said in the end you have more or less a browser.
Yeah.
Then what is the advantage of your approach instead of using, let's say, custom tabs?
So we use this sometimes web view, a custom tab, but for us we want to have like a real experience, native experience. And web view we used before, we still use it sometimes to do some tests fast because as you know they develop way faster than Android. So we do some tests in web, but web view is really tricky. And if you open a tab that you mentioned, it's like another app. And we don't want to redirect people to another app because as we are bank, maybe people won't trust. We open external app, somebody's sniffing information. So we want to be really native in this case. So build this component makes sense for our team. This server-driven UI is not applied in the whole organization. It's more in my team that fit pretty well because our screen is static, but there are other screens like transfer that you need to do a lot of input. Doesn't make sense to have a server-driven UI. Yeah.
Is everything in your app server-driven, or is
yes, there are many screens that now most of the screen that I'm working, I try to be server-driven UI. But sometimes we have checkbox, and if you have checkbox, we have state in the front end. So I mix BFF with server-driven UI. I just need to have a normal BFF and I have a list of items. And in this case, I need to create a new module, all those setup, and the thing in the middle, server-driven UI. I don't need to think about tests, those things. But the rest, that's the BFF. It's normal approach as an Android developer. They need to cry sometimes, but yeah.
Thank you.
But we have a Bootstrap to help us. So think about automation. It's always nice.
Do you manage the navigation like single top, single task, and stuff like that? And if you do, how do you do it?
So most of my cases doesn't have this. It's just open a new screen. So we just do the normal start activity.
Okay. So you don't have this kind of problematic.
Yeah. And another thing that maybe you might ask is about start activity for result. We don't care so much because if you do start activity for result, you need to set what is the code, try to have the callback and so on. And now in Android we have the listener for this, the callback for this. So what we do just to make it simple because the user don't stay long in the app. So we don't need to super optimize it. So what we do is if they come back, refresh the screen. We have a cache policy, max age and cache. So we don't need to worry about this. Just simplify the code as much as possible. Less code, better. Yeah, okay. So if you have more questions, just head to the party. I will be really happy to discuss about this topic or other topic that you might like.